Hello and welcome to the Legacy Crusaders YouTube channel. This is BenGGie, and today I'm going to share my deck list from the Yugituber Grand Championship Mokuba League second round. This is not the deck list I played, this is the deck list I wish I would have played. I'm going to run through the deck list and why I like this deck list, and I'll show the other deck list. Even though it is worse, it is 40 cards, the other list. It does play more Mech Knights and more Shaddolls, but no Phantom Knights, meaning it's a lot brickier. Because the Phantom Knights, you have a lot more one-card starters with the Torn Scales and the reinforcement of the army, as well as any Phantom Knight plus Silent Boots is also most of what you need in order to get what you want out of the deck. The problem with this deck list is that the combo you get is somewhat variant on your hand. You don't always get the same thing, but generally you're trying to put out a Winda that isn't connected to Shaddoll Schism, so they can't just lose to Twin Twister or Cosmic Cyclone. You do that using Verte Anaconda to either send Instant Fusion, Magical Eyes Fusion, or Shaddoll Fusion to the graveyard, depending on whether you have a Dingirsu on the board, whether or not you're able to put a Shaddoll in the graveyard, or have a Shaddoll in your hand, and all of those things get different possible outcomes, all of which are good enough to play. So let me run through the card by card. I will assume you know what every card does. I will address any particular connections between the engines that's worth mentioning. Most of the engines are held together by Cherubini being able to send level 3s from the deck to the graveyard. The actual deck list I played didn't play the Phantom Knight engine, so that didn't have the same piece of glue that holds everything together. So here's the deck list. We have 2 copies of Purple Nightfall, 1 copy of Blue Sky. Because this deck is going first intentionally, I played a lower Mech Knight count than I did in the other deck list I actually played. 3 Girsu, 1 Symbol Skeleton, 1 Nightmare. The Symbol Skeleton can be milled off of the Cherubini, which is good to do if you open Torn Scales and discard the either the Girsu or the Orcust Nightmare. Then you might want to send the Symbol Skeleton to the graveyard off of the Cherubini. I got 1 Orcust Nightmare, 1 World Wand. For the Shaddolls, I play 1 Squamata, which gives you access to all the Shaddolls. Dragon I might cut for more space. I don't feel like this particular card comes up enough. 1 Ariel for utility on messing with graveyards. Banishing your own cards in the graveyard can be really useful. You can try and make it so you can summon your Galatea and Dingirsu both in the same turn from the graveyard by banishing one of them and using Wand to bring one back and Skeleton to bring the other one back. I only play 1 of each because of the 1 of each of Galatea and Dingirsu, just because the extra deck is really tight. There's no room for more things. Got 1 Wendy and 1 Hedgehog, which are the level 3s you send to the graveyard off of the Cherubini, depending on the number of extenders you have. Just putting 1 of them in the graveyard, even though you're not activating the effect, because Cherubini is a cost. You gain access to using Magical Eyes Fusion in order to perform the Fusion Summon at the end of the combo. Playing 3 Torn Scales, which by themselves can dump Ancient Cloak, which by itself can add the Silent Boots, and then you have 2 level 3s to go into Cherubini. If you send a Phantom Knight and activate it, you'll get back your Torn Scales, which should give you access to quite a bit of the Phantom Knight plays. Again, there's no specific outcome off of a Torn Scale. You get Rusty plus 2 Fog Blades, I guess, as a guarantee. Then depending on the extenders or other cards in your hand, you could gain access to Winda or Dingirsu and so on. I play 1 Stain Greaves as an additional extender. That's if you already have access to Silent Boots, or if you already drew your Shade Brigandine, because that's used to go into Rusty for the most part, because it can't be used to make most other things because it's a normal monster. Reinforcement of the army to grab Torn Scale or maybe an extender. For the other spells in the deck, I'm playing 2 Shaddoll Fusion because it's better going second than going first. I am choosing to go first, and the truth is I want to have access to both L and regular Shaddoll Fusion. So I can Fusion Summon twice in a turn. They're both once per turn. And for the most part, I just search them off of Verte Anaconda. I'm not really trying to open them. Opening them is fine because it helps you get some of the cards out of your hand. It could be the Shaddolls, it could be the Orcust cards. So they have some abilities to do that, which is kind of cool. L is nicer because it can't get ashed, but usually you use Verte and Verte can't get ashed, so it's not usually a problem. L is also nicer if you're concerned about your Schism getting MST'd, so it's nice to play 1 of those. I play Instant Fusion, which is useful as both an extender while also giving me a Shaddoll. So if I have like Orcust Nightmare in hand with the Shaddoll Fusion, and I have Instant Fusion, not only can I I can use Instant Fusion to summon my Winda, I can then fuse another Winda, putting my Nightmare in graveyard, while also getting the first Winda to pick up the Shaddoll Fusion. So the Shaddoll Fusion's back in hand. Then you can revive the Winda from the graveyard with things like Succession or other cards that can bring it out of the graveyard. Resh, Monster Reborn, and so on. Succession is searchable off of Morningstar, which you can do with the Mekk-Knight part of the deck. Magical Eyes Fusion is probably the most used fusion spell on the turn 1 combos. Usually you do it by starting the combos by discarding a Shaddoll off of Torn Scales, and if you have the extenders you need, instead of discarding the Shaddoll, you might mill the Shaddoll off of the Cherubini. Foolish Burial is just an extender. It gets to any part of the engine that you want except for the Mekk-Knight engine. Reborn gets to every part of the engine that winds up in the graveyard, and Cherubini can send different pieces as well. I play back removal in every deck I play, even if it's just the Feather Duster, but this one I've decided to play 1 Feather Duster and 1 Cosmic Cyclone. I play 2 Dark Ruler No More in the main deck. There's no hand traps in the main deck. I'm also maining 3 Super Poly just to give me something to do going second. Even if I just brick Super Poly and a Shaddoll, that should be able to do something. I'm playing Orcust Babel for the Orcust part of the deck, which usually is the first card I set. The other list is a little better at keeping Galatea on board. This one doesn't, so you almost always go into Babel. And then the Dingirsu winds up in the graveyard, and then you wind up summoning it back during your opponent's turn with Rusty Bardiche for a double pop. Crescendo is there if you already have the Babel. Or in mid to late game, if you take over the board, you might want to just set this and ensure your opponent can't come back. I play Resh to just recycle the Winda and the Apkallone and loop them, because the fusion count in this deck is really low. Sometimes you need to bring Winda back just to keep your opponent from really playing. They have to keep playing in main phase 2 because they have to keep battling to deal with Winda. Also, you can bring Apkallone back later in the game, and then Apkallone can use its graveyard effect to return your Shaddolls from the graveyard to the extra deck if you want to fuse them again. That came up in one of the matches on the Mokuba League tournament. Schism is just Schism, it just summons Shaddolls, it outs Dragoon, things like that. I'm playing 3 Fogblades for the Phantom Knight engine because I don't mind discarding 1 for Torn Scales for parts of the combo early. I play a Phantom Knight Sword, so I don't have to use a Fogblade for that. And 1 Shade Brigandine, which is just a dark monster you can summon. Based on the links I have, it's only useful at making Morningstar, Rusty Bardiche, and I think that's it, but it can be used for the fusion for Winda. So it has some overlaps there. In the extra deck, I have the 1 Construct, which is mostly summoned off of Schism, because you usually have a Mekk-Knight in graveyard by the time you would summon it. It is possible to summon it earlier, and then just send Schism, but it's not the easiest thing to do. 1 Starving Venom for the Super Poly target, for outing Dragoon and Vertes. Apkallone is just a solid card to bring out late game. Depending on what I open, it's possible to hard fusion summon this and use it to get Schism play. I have used Apkallone's discard effect to put Orcust cards in graveyard before, which is kind of nice. Even when I've drawn Succession before, I have used my Morningstar to search my wand, and then used Apkallone to put the wand in graveyard, which is kind of cool. 2 Windas, one's for like turn 1 combo, and one's for like a Schism later on if they just out the first Winda. Dingirsu is just part of the Orcust part of the deck. Often you'll banish it off of Schism or Ariel in order to bring it back with Wand, so you can have both Ding and Galatea on board at the same time. Access Code Talker, just for OTKing, usually summoned off of the Selene plus a Winda, which means you get to float Winda into another spell again. Rusty Bardiche just for turn 1 setups for setting up Fogblades and getting access to parts of the PK engine. Selene for reviving Winda. So usually you use a Winda in order to make Selene, and then you'll bring Selene back. So you'll float your fusion spells out of the graveyard twice, so you don't really like fall behind on resources. I think in the Mokuba League match, I got Ogred on my Selene, and it needs to summon to his own at points too, so that caused a problem for me. You can also bring back Apkallone if you have a card you really want to discard, or search a Shaddoll card. I play Morningstar. This is for getting Wand out of my hand. Also, sometimes just searching Succession gives you access to cards in your graveyard you might want to be able to reach. So having a searchable way to Succession is really useful. one Galatea for parts of the combo and getting access to the Orcust cards. Cherubini is the card that gets you pretty much everything else in the deck, so it's really hard to stop because it sends a card to the graveyard as cost, so not a lot you can do about it. Also, if you just have like Cherubini plus Instant Fusion, you can just summon Winda to its pointer and then they have to try and out it. And then if you just set cards every time they try to destroy Cherubini so that Instant Fusion will try to kill the Winda in the end phase, you could just use Cherubini's second effect to make sure it doesn't get destroyed by just sending cards that you set to the graveyard. Verte is just for accessing whichever fusion spell I need. Generally it should all fusion if possible. Gravity Controller is just for linking off the Apkallone, and Linkuriboh is for Girsu, because the token is a normal monster and can't be used to make Galatea. In the extra deck, on the side deck, I'm on the third Purple Nightfall and the second and third Blue Sky. This is just for going second against a deck where I don't believe the hand traps I have are particularly useful. Maybe I need beaters, or I also play these sometimes against like Shaddolls, because I want to have special summonable monsters that don't start a chain, so I don't just lose to Winda instantly. For hand traps, I'm on 2 Lancia and 3 Droll, but it could be the other way around. I side a Super Poly target for when it's useful, so if I'm going first against Dragon Link and I know they're on Dragon Link, I put this in because you can fuse away like Hieratic Seal and a bunch of guard dragons, maybe a Striker Dragon and LP. But it's also good versus like the bird matchup. 2 Twin Twisters for like Prank Kids or Shaddolls trying to deal with back row. 2 Sinister Shadow Games for sending Ariel and messing with people's graveyards, and 2 copies of Unending Nightmare. This is an IRL build, and the place I play at, there's a lot of floodgates, so I'd rather just deal with floodgates with Unending Nightmare. So that's the deck list. I'll show some combos in a minute, but first I'm sure most people are interested in the list that actually was played in the Mokuba League. I'll show that right now. The list I actually played in the Mokuba League played 3 Purple Nightfalls and 1 Indigo Eclipse, which I don't play anymore because it's very rare I need to summon an extra body. This deck has a bigger extra deck, bit more room for an extra deck, but I didn't really play that many more Link monsters that were like worth going into to justify needing the extra body, so I didn't like it in the long run and cut it. This list also played Beast, which is useful, but it's still just a filler card. You could just send a Shaddol you need. It's brickier than the other Shaddolls, so I wound up cutting it from the other list. I had 2 Blue Sky. I kind of made this deck to be more middle play, so I was more open to going second as just like an option. So when I played it, it had more Mekk-Knights in the main deck. I had 1 Dragon, 2 Squamata, so I put more Squamatas in just so that it thins the deck faster. So every time you sent the Shaddoll to the grave, you just always sent Squamata so it can get to the Shaddoll you wanted, just to thin the deck. So it was a really small deck count at 40. But I find when your deck is at 40, it's like really hard to side deck. Like, you can't really take things out. There's nothing that can really go out, especially when you're not playing hand traps. Usually you take out bad hand traps for good hand traps. There are 3 Girsu, 1 Ariel, 1 Wendy, 1 Skeleton, 1 Hog, and 1 Chaos, because you can... This build was able to fusion a bit more than the other build more often, because it played more fusion spells and was a smaller deck count. Sometimes you'd fuse the Hog away and search the Chaos to have access to a light for a construct. In the long run, I decided it was just a bad idea, not worth playing. One of the other things, let's see, you go through the list, I play Instant Fusion, Magical Eyes Fusion, Feather Duster, and 2 Cosmics for back removal. 2 Shaddoll Fusion, 2 Dark Ruler, nothing new here, 1 Foolish, 1 Succession, 2 L's. Again, I was trying to fuse more because there were more Shaddolls in the deck, so the extra L was helpful for that also. This deck had a much stronger weakness to Ash than the other one, based on a different card in the extra deck I'll get into in a minute. There's the 2 Cosmics, 2 Super Polys, because I was going kind of mid, first, second, didn't really have a preference. I was playing Babel, Resh, Schism, and War Legacy Secrets is just another search target for the Morningstar. Because this deck was more Mekk-Knight focused, it made sense to play. It can also bring back Winda, and it can bring back Construct, and then Construct can mill your Ariel and hit your opponent's graveyard. It came up in the other games where I brought back a Construct. I don't think I really did much with it. I think I just sent Beast and drew a card. Playing 1 Crescendo for the Orcust package. In the extra deck, Rusty and Cherubini aren't here, and instead I have a Secure Gardna, which is for a combo with the Girsu and Purple Nightfall and a Shaddoll and the second construct. So you can fit a little bit more in the extra deck if you don't play the Phantom Knight engine, but nothing is required. The side deck was different for the tournament. I had 2 nibs because because the Mokuba League had a strange ban list with like a lot of the meta banned. I didn't know how many monsters people would be summoning, so I didn't want to main them. The blue sky is just like good for blowing out back row decks by just having more monsters to summon. I thought that our second aerial might come up in some matchup scenarios. The App Cologne was here if the Super Poly was dead in the matchup, and I would cut the Super Polys and cut the Starving Venom. The third Shaddoll Fusion was for going second, the third Super Poly was for going second. 2 Dynamiscus were for going first, and the 3 Shadow Games were when Aerial was good. So the big thing about the Secure Garden in this list is something I'm going to show. So in order for that to be useful, I have to open like Girsu, a fusion spell, and a Shaddoll, which is not common to do anyway. So here's Girsu, a Shaddoll, and a fusion. So you can normal Girsu send your Nightmare to grave, and I'm going to make a light monster using my Linkaribo. So you can go into Linkaribo and then link into Secure Gardna to create a light monster. So this is doing this with Girsu. Like I know I could play like Artemis and turn any Shaddoll into a light monster to do the fusion, but I wanted to be able to do it off the normal summon of Girsu. So that was part of the thing. The problem with this play is if you have Shaddoll fusion and they ash you, you can't do anything because you locked up your extra monster zone with a link monster that can't really be used for anything. So that's the problem with this play in the long run, why it got cut. And I went to the other deck list. The other thing I'd like to show, I guess, is Girsu plus a Mekk-Knight. So just gonna have to like draw some hands, I guess, until I get to it. Shouldn't be that hard to do. There's Girsu, and I don't have a Mekk-Knight, so just to show you, like one of the options with Girsu and a Mekk-Knight. Girsu, Girsu. Girsu? Where's this card? Girsu and a Mekk-Knight. It's better in the other build to have Girsu and a Mekk-Knight, and I'll show you why. Why I like the other deck list better. Here you give your opponent a card to have on their field. You go into the Linkaribo, you can summon the blue sky, search for whatever we don't have, I guess in this case Purple Nightfall. We're going to link off the blue sky and the Linkaribo, discarding an extra Mekk-Knight to search succession. In this case, because we have the extra Mekk-Knights, we can, but we wouldn't normally have that Indigo. Just try and search your follow-up play. And then succession can just bring back a body for whatever you need it for. So I opened a Shaddoll, so at some point you're just going to go into Verte and fuse with Shaddoll Fusion and set secrets. Again, I haven't played this deck in a while since the tournament match, so I don't really play this version anymore. Let me show you what we can do with the Phantom Knight build, and then we'll sign off. So in the Phantom Knight build, I have a lot more options. Like this is a pretty solid hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Torn Scales discarding my Girsu, which I'm going to be able to get out of the graveyard, because I'm going to be able to make Cherubini send Symbol Skeleton, which is pretty cool. So I gain access to that engine. Now I opened Instant Fusion, which also makes things really easy. So again, like I said, where this deck goes varies because you can send different things at different times. It might have been good to set a card so that if Cherubini got ogred or something, it would protect itself. So we're going to use Skeleton to summon Girsu, which can then send Nightmare, which gets access to Wand. I'm sorry, Nightmare is going to send Wand, and then Wand is going to bring back the Skeleton, so both are going to be in the graveyard. On the follow-up, I'm going to use the Silent Boots to search for the Jade Brigandine. I mean, depending on the number of extenders you have, you might not want the Shade Brigandine. You can just grab a Fog Blade, but this brings back the Torn Scale. I grabbed the Shade Brigandine because it's the only thing that can be used. It doesn't have much use in this deck other than making the Rusty. I'm gonna go into a Galatea here. Shuffle back the wand to set the skeleton. Now I could make Verte, depending on what I might want to do. Like, what I probably will do is activate Instant Fusion, then play Shaddoll Fusion, fusing the skeleton to the graveyard with the other Winda, so that the Winda will grab back the Shaddoll Fusion. But you also have a whole bunch of other options on like how you might want to take this turn. Like, I could just link these, go into Verte, and then Magicalize Fusion. But Magicalize Fusion could be useful to just get into later. So in this case, I'm just going to fuse 2 cards into Winda. And then because the Winda went to the grave, she'll activate and add back the Shaddoll Fusion. And I'll make Ding. Try and keeping my link zones clear in this case, because my opponent didn't get a token from this. So exactly what you get out of this board and this deck is always variant, and I didn't even use the Rusty yet. Just send an Ancient Cloak for next turn and set a Fog Blade. The other thing you can set is you can set the Sword to protect the Winda from being destroyed. The Ding can protect the Winda from being destroyed. So these are all cool options with this deck. If you like this deck, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, and I'll see you in future videos. Alright, it was a pleasure seeing you all. I hope you enjoyed my match in the Mokuba League. You can make fun of me for throwing game 1, which I definitely did. All I had to do was make Ding and send away Goides and try and get over that Burger Trio, and odds are I would have won game 1. As you saw, I won game 2, and who knows, maybe I would have won game 3 if it went a little